Not long ago, I sat down with Bill Rogers. You may know him as the 4-time Boston Marathon winner and New York Marathon... What? Oh, the other Bill Rogers. Right. I sat down with Bill Rogers' voice actor. You may know him as appearing in a symbol insert, K.O. Beast, His and Her Circumstances, Comic Party, Two Heart. He's best known for his work in Gravitation as Toma, Boogie Pop Phantom as Yamamoto, Genshiken, Shingu, and more recently in The Third as Kevin. And he can also be heard on Saturday mornings as the voice of Brock in Pokemon. He's also a number of other Pokemon in that show, and outside of anime, you may have heard him in Super Smash Brothers. He's also done some work in Eminem's game and Xbox game Bullet Witch. So here's Bill Rogers.
So, what was the first convention you attended?
Oh Christ, you know, it's there you go, right off the bat. All right, cut. Man, he's swearing, he's using the Lord's name in vain. The first convention that I ever went to actually was an Icon convention back when I was a high school kid. I'm not going to say my age because I'm not going to date myself like that, but I've been an anime fan for a very long time, and I'm older than most of Fandom, probably by twice, because, you know, they're all like little 15, 16-year-old kids. But when I was in high school, nobody knew really what anime was. I can give you a general date range by saying I was in the Robotech generation. It was when all the other kids were watching Transformers and G.I. Joe, and I was too. I loved all those shows, but I watched Robotech and I was like, wow, this is really good. And then, like, after the show had been long over, somebody said to me, oh, that was Japanese anime, and like gave me a copy of the Macross movie. So I had friends who were like big into sci-fi, but nobody who really knew anything about the anime stuff. So a group of us, when we were in high school, went over to the Icon convention every year, and there was a little bit of anime there, but it was mostly just science fiction, fantasy, role-playing, you know. They had, you know, like Gary Gygax was always like a guest there, and they'd have like, you know, somebody from Star Trek, and then every once in a while they'd have like a room where they'd be like, we're going to show Vampire Hunter D, or, you know, something like that. And so that was my first convention, but from there I went off and went to, I was at the first Otakon, I don't know if it was at the first Katsucon and NekoCon, but I was at a lot of the earlier ones of those. We used to all hop into like a van and drive down to like Virginia and, you know, cram as many people as we could into a hotel room. So we were all poor college kids at the time. And just to go and hang out and watch anime and see all the cool stuff that was going on.
And so your first convention as a guest came much later.
Much later, and actually the beautiful thing about that was, I don't know if we'll preface this by shows that I've worked on, but one of the shows that I've talked about a lot is Genshiken, which is about anime fans. It's an anime about anime fans. And when I was in college, I actually didn't go to Stony Brook, which is where the Icon conventions are, but I had friends from Stony Brook. And they had an anime club, and I used to always hang out with those people. And it's funny because the Cheng brothers, Clark and Eugene, were friends of mine when we were in college, and Eugene went off to start Anime Next, and Clark had worked for Software Sculptors for a while, then he worked for Bang Zoom, and now he works with Media Blasters. He bounced his way around the industry, but when Eugene started Anime Next, he had invited me as a guest for that first convention, and that was around the time where I really wasn't doing a lot of stuff. And on top of that, I don't remember which came first, it's the chicken or the egg type of thing, because around that same year, Icon had me as a guest because they had started to develop an anime track, and Anime Next was also like a fresh convention, and they both were like, I at that point had done like a simple insert in Boogie Pop Phantom, which a lot of people really didn't know about either show, but they were like, you're a voice actor, please come to our convention. So I did those, and then what happened was as time went along, after I did Toma Seguchi and Gravitation, conventions were like, oh, because the fangirl contingent is just like, oh my god, it's gravitation! So I started getting invited to more cons from there. And then when I got involved in Pokemon, it was just, you know, that really opened the doors. Because I think one year, the year I started doing Pokemon, which was back in 2006, almost 4 years ago, when I started doing it, I think that first year, I was probably at like a dozen conventions that year. And I was at the point where I used to just do like 2 or 3 a year. But yeah, I started going a lot more conventions when that happened.
And what was it like going to your convention for the first time as a guest?
Weird. I mean, I was so used to kind of, when I would go, I would hang out with different people who I was friends with Jeff Thompson and Toshifumi Yoshida and Trish Lado, and a lot of different people who worked in the industry. And it was weird because I had my pals were like a varied hat, because Trish and Toshi worked for, well, they worked for U.S. Renditions first, and then they were working for Viz for a long time, and now Toshi's with Bandai. I was friends with Shin Kurokawa, who was with AnimeGo at the time. Jeff was Right Stuff International. Clark was working off with Software Sculptors CPM. My other friend Jason worked at CPM. So I would go to the conventions and hang out with these industry people, and I'd be around like a lot of like the green rooms and the guest events and stuff like that. And so I started to know like people from con staffs and different things. But the first time I was actually going, and it's like, well, here's your badge, and you go to the green room, and it was like, I get to do all this by myself. I don't have to actually be with somebody. It was an interesting experience, but I always had a great time. So it didn't lessen my enjoyment of it. If anything, it enhanced, because now I not only got to go and, you know, still be able to geek out and watch anime and sit in on panels and do stuff, but I was actually they were actually asking me to talk to the fans, and fans were actually interested in getting my autograph, and it was a weird experience for me, because it was like, now not only can I go and have fun, but now people actually give a crap that I'm there.
Now, obviously with going to the first Otakon, it's a lot larger now than it was back in
when I was in Penn State?
Yeah. And, but other than the size, how has the fandom at conventions changed? Like if you compared a convention of that size to one of that size today, how would they be?
Well, conventions in general, their attendance has gotten different. I've lived through the years of where we were all kind of like, you know, college age or older, and you had people in 20s and 30s and sometimes up to their 40s that were like, you know, well, I love Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers and, you know, Gundam and stuff like that, and all these older shows. And I remember that, like, I know that seeing over the years, it went from these people who were, you know, 20s, 30s, and 40s guys mainly. It was like, you know, I would say it was like 90% male at the beginning of the convention runs. And then it started to become an even male-female mix, and then they also started to get younger and younger. And not because I was getting older, but actually because a lot of them are high school kids and junior high, and you see kids that are like 12 and 13 running around with Naruto outfits, and I'm like, this would have never happened back, you know, in the day, because it was the cons, the anime cons were an offshoot of the sci-fi conventions, so it was all these, you know, grizzled old Star Trek fans that, you know, also were into anime. Whereas now it's just kids, anybody can get, it started with, you know, Suncoast and Hot Topic, and now it's everywhere, you know. I mean, anime is just, you can find it everywhere, and it's on TV all the time, so our audience is greatly varied and changed.
So you do a lot of panels at all these conventions. What questions do you like to be asked by the fans?
Not the one question that I shouldn't say this because it's a rude thing to say, but the question I always get asked is, how do I become a voice actor? Which we hear over and over and over again. But it's not that, you know, I understand the enthusiasm and I think it's great, but I do like to get asked questions about, you know, the shows, and like, you know, people that actually want to know like what I'm interested in, what shows I'm watching and everything, and I like to know what they're interested in, I like to talk to the fans about like what's new, because I feel like I've kind of fallen behind, especially this World Wide Web age that we live in, where kids are seeing these shows as they're airing in Japan. I mean, it used to be that we had if you had an exchange student friend that would mail you videotapes, and we'd all sit around, huddled around a TV set, like, what did we get this month, and watch, just random. We had a tape trading group where we would trade with an exchange student. We'd send him like Star Trek Enterprise and X-Files and stuff, and then he'd send us anime. But now it's just like, oh, I've logged on and I found this, and I don't have the time to do that anymore. I'm between working on scripts and voice work and bouncing around in auditions and studios and stuff, I don't have the time to watch the shows that I'd really like to. And there's so much stuff out there that I just don't know about. So I like talking with the fans one-on-one about, like, hey, what's going on out there, what's new, and what's what interesting projects. But when people talk about, when we can get the chance to talk about the process and what it's like to do this character, and what did you do to prepare for this, or different things. I always like it when I get a varied group of questions and it's not just the same questions over and over and over again. It's not how do you get into this industry, and who's your favorite Pokemon, and it's just like when it's different questions, it makes it for it makes it interesting and organic.
Now, are there any conventions out there that you would like to go to, that you've been hoping to get an invitation, like any particular place in the world that you'd like to visit, maybe through a convention?
I love the opportunity to go to conventions because I find it an interesting way to get out and see different places that I haven't been before. I've been all up and down the East Coast. I've done conventions from Maine to Florida. I haven't really gone too far out West Coast. I actually did San Diego Comic-Con one year, but with a lot of the bigger anime shows, I haven't. I like big anime conventions and small anime conventions, because with the big shows it's really kind of neat because there's a lot of cool people to meet and there's a lot of stuff going on. But the small conventions are fun too, because then you get to kind of hang out with the staff and get to know people, and I get a lot of staffers who are like, they get these guests that are kind of like isolated, and they want to like stay in their room and then like come down and do their autographs and then go back and hide or go out somewhere and not stay. But I love walking around on the convention floor, going to the dealer's room, hanging out, having a good time. And a lot of times convention staff are like, oh, well, you don't have to stick around. I'm like, I want to go to an anime convention. This is why I came. But I would like to try Otakon again, because I actually went, when Gravitation first came out, the Bright Stuff had me down there to help them promote the show, and I did a panel with Judy and Chris Kleckner, and we were pushing Gravitation, and they did a screening, and I signed autographs and everything, but I was more like an industry representative at that point. Like, I was there with them to help them push this product, whereas they've never actually had me as a guest. But even when I went, that was like 2004, 2005, I want to say, and it was a zoo compared to when it was a little tiny convention. I'd like to give it another shot just to see what it's become, because I haven't been there in like 4 or 5 years now. But like I said, I love all the little small conventions, and just going to all different areas is kind of neat, and, kind of being around. I heard there's a convention in Hawaii, which would be really cool, but that's just because everybody would love to go to Hawaii. There's also an Anime Vegas, but I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, the big city draw is always neat, but I mean, we did PortCon, and that was fun because we got to go up and kind of see Maine, and it's not something I had done since I was a kid, and it's nice.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.